Hiruluk's death. Hiruluk was a quack doctor on Drum Island. He couldn't actually heal people. He knew that, but he believed so completely in the idea of medicine that he kept trying anyway. He found Chopper, a reindeer who had eaten the human fruit, and took him in when no one else would. He became Chopper's father in every way that mattered. When Hiruluk heard that the doctors of Drum Island were dying, he went to save them. He thought they were sick. He prepared his cure and walked into Wapple's castle alone, but it was a trap. There were no sick doctors. Wapple used the people Hiruluk cared about as bait to lure him out. Hiruluk walked in knowing it was a trap. He went anyway. Wapple has him surrounded. His soldiers are ready to execute him, but Hiruluk refuses to let Wapple have that. He pulls out a vial of his own medicine and drinks it. He blows himself up from the inside before they can kill him. He dies laughing. And the reason this is so disturbing is not the explosion. It's the line he says right before it. He asks when a man truly dies, not when he is shot, not when he is hanged. A man truly dies only when he is forgotten by the living. Then he detonates himself, making sure no one else gets to decide how his story ends. Chopper watched all of this happen. He was a child, standing in the snow, watching his father choose to die rather than be executed by the man who ruined their island. That image never fully leaves this series. Chopper carries it everywhere he goes. Nami's backstory. Nami grew up in a small fishing village called Kokoyasi. Her adoptive mother, Bellamere, was a marine who found two small children abandoned on a battlefield and brought them home. She raised Nami and Nojiko on almost nothing. She was poor. Sometimes she didn't eat, so the girls could. Then Arlong arrived. Arlong was a fishman who took over the entire region. He imposed a monthly tribute on every village. Adults paid a set amount. Children paid less. If you couldn't pay, you died. When his soldiers came to Kokoyasi, Bellamere had just enough money to pay for herself or just enough for the two girls. Not both, not all three. She paid for Nami and Nojiko. She told Arlong out loud that she was their mother. Not because it would save her. She knew what it meant. She said it because she wanted the girls to know, right there in that moment with soldiers surrounding them, that she claimed them, that they were hers. Arlong shot her in front of them. Then he took Nami. He discovered she could draw perfect navigational charts, which he needed, so he made her a deal. If she could buy back her village for 100 million berries, he would release it. She was a child. 100 million berries. She spent the next 8 years stealing from pirates, saving every coin, working for the man who killed her mother, all to earn back the village he took from her. What makes this so disturbing is not the violence, it's the system. Arlong built a trap with no honest exit. He gave her hope specifically because hope made her more useful to him than despair would. He needed her to believe she could win, so she would keep working. She spent 8 years of her childhood inside that trap, alone, unable to tell anyone, smiling when she needed to, so she could survive one more day. The destruction of Ohara. The world government has one rule above everything else. No one is allowed to research the Void Century, the 100 years of history that has been deliberately erased from every record in the world. The scholars of Ohara had been doing exactly that for decades, in secret, beneath a massive tree of accumulated knowledge. They found the truth, or they were close to it. The government's response was a buster call. A buster call is not a targeted strike. It is not a surgical operation to remove a threat. It is total annihilation of everything in the area. 5 vice admirals, 10 warships, the order to leave nothing standing. They destroyed the entire island, every person on it. The scholars, yes, but also civilians, people who had nothing to do with any research, people who just lived there because it was home. The soldiers did not distinguish. The scholars, knowing they were about to die, threw all their books into the lake to preserve them. Hundreds of years of accumulated knowledge thrown into the water. And Clover, the head scholar, was shot mid-sentence while trying to tell the government representative what they had actually discovered. They killed him before he could finish speaking. They did not want to hear it. Nico Robin was 8 years old. She was on that island. She watched all of it happen. She was the only survivor, and the world government immediately put a bounty on her head. Not because she was dangerous, because she could read the poneglyphs, because she might one day tell someone what the scholars of Ohara knew. They put a bounty on an 8-year-old child to make sure no one in the world would shelter her. She spent the next 20 years running. Going Mary's death. The Going Mary was not just a ship. Oda built the entire Water 7 arc around the idea that a ship, loved deeply by the people who sailed on it, could develop a soul. And when the crew finally accepted that Mary was beyond saving, that her keel was broken, and she could not make it to the end of the Grand Line, what followed is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the series. Mary speaks. The spirit of the ship, which had been silently protecting the crew in moments they never understood, appears and speaks to them. She thanks them. She says she was happy. She says the voyage was everything she could have wanted. And then they burn the ship. It's a Viking funeral. The crew stands on the water watching the Going Mary burn, and she sinks smiling. That is the only word for it. The ship goes under with the expression of something at peace. What makes this disturbing and not just sad is Usopp. Usopp had fought the crew over Mary. He left the crew over Mary. He understood what was being lost before any of the others would admit it. And he stood there at the end, after all of that, crying and apologizing to the ship for not being able to save her. He was the one who loved her most openly. He had to watch anyway. There is something deeply unsettling about grief that cannot be fixed, about watching something you love come to its end and being able to do nothing but stand there. Oda made an inanimate object feel so completely like a character that her death hit harder than most human deaths in the series. Robin at Enies lobby. Robin had spent her whole life believing she was a burden, that anyone who got close to her would eventually be be destroyed because of the bounty on her head. She had trained herself not to want anything, not to hope, because every time she got close to something good, the government came and took it away. When she surrendered herself to the world government at Enies lobby, she was not being selfless. She believed she was being realistic. She believed that letting herself be taken was the only way to keep the Straw Hats alive. Luffy responded by declaring war on the world government, and then came the moment that broke the scene open. Luffy told her to say what she wanted, to say it out loud, and Robin, who had never in her adult life allowed herself to want anything out loud, who had survived specifically by wanting nothing, said it. "I want to live." She screamed it. What makes this so disturbing is not the moment itself. It's the 20 years of silence before it. A woman had spent 2 decades convincing herself that wanting to exist was a burden on others, that the correct thing to do was to be small and hidden and ask for nothing. She had to be talked into believing that her own survival was worth wanting. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of damage that takes years to build and a specific kind of cruelty to cause. Ace's death. Ace was about to be executed. The entire Marineford arc was built around Luffy trying to stop it. Luffy broke into the most heavily fortified location in the world. He fought 2 Marine admirals. He got there in time. Ace was freed. They were running. They were going to make it. Then Akainu said something about Whitebeard. Ace turned around. That is the most disturbing part. Not the punch, not the wound. The fact that Ace stopped because he could not let an insult to Whitebeard go unanswered. He had spent his entire life believing he should never have been born. That existing as the son of Gold D. Roger was a curse on everyone around him. Whitebeard was the person who made him feel like his life had value. Akainu knew how to make him react, and it worked exactly as it was meant to work. Ace died in Luffy's arms. He thanked everyone for loving him. He asked if his life had any meaning, if it was okay that he was born. Luffy did not speak for days. He did not move. He had to be physically dragged to safety by Jinbei. He was completely destroyed. What makes Ace's death so specifically disturbing is that it did not have to happen. There was no inevitability to it. It was a series of small choices, each completely in character, that added up to the worst possible outcome. Ace's pride, Akainu's calculation, 1 second too slow, everything aligned in exactly the wrong way, and Oda let it land. Dressrosa's Toy Curse. Doflamingo did not take Dressrosa by force. He engineered a situation where the previous king had no choice but to flee, then stepped in as the solution. He gave the people stability. He gave them prosperity. They gave him their loyalty without asking where the prosperity came from. It came from smile factories built on the backs of people who had been turned into toys. Sugar's ability let her transform any person into a toy, and when a person became a toy, everyone who had ever loved them forgot they existed. Completely. Instantly. Husbands forgot their wives. Children forgot their parents. The toys were still there, working and suffering, right in front of the people who should have remembered them, and no one noticed anything was missing, because the memory had been removed. There was no grief, because there was no awareness that anything had been lost. Doflamingo built an entire kingdom on top of that and called it peace. The people living there were happy. They had no idea what was under the surface of their happiness. The toys walked among them every single day. Big Mom's backstory. Charlotte Linlin was not born a monster. That is the entire point. She was a child who was enormous and uncontrollably strong, and destroyed everything around her without meaning to. She did not understand her own strength. She could not control it, and the adults in her life abandoned her rather than help her. Carmel found her, raised her. Linlin loved Carmel completely and genuinely, in the way a young child loves the person who saves them. At the birthday feast, when Linlin was 6 years old, she went into one of her eating frenzies, a trance driven entirely by the need for semla. When she came back to herself, Carmel was gone. Every adult on the island was gone. Oda makes it clear what happened. In the frenzy, she consumed everyone there, including the person she loved most, without knowing she had done it. The horror is not that she did it, it is that she never knew. She has spent her entire life calling for Carmel, looking for her, building a kingdom, having dozens of children, collecting power across decades, all of it built around this one unresolved loss she cannot name. And underneath all of that is the thing she cannot look at directly, the possibility that she is what made Carmel disappear. When someone shows her the photograph at Whole Cake Island, her mind breaks before she can process it. She collapses. She cannot face it. The most powerful woman in the world is still, somewhere underneath all of it, the 6-year-old girl crying for the mother who vanished. Pudding and Sanji Pudding had been raised as a weapon. Her third eye was considered monstrous. She had been mocked for it her entire life by people who were supposed to love her. She learned to perform sweetness because that was how she survived. Every kind thing she showed Sanji and the crew was a performance. She was going to shoot him on their wedding day. She had done it before. Then Sanji said her third eye was beautiful. That is all. He meant it. He was not calculating. He looked at the things she had been taught to be ashamed of her whole life and said it was beautiful. Pudding's face collapsed. She started crying and could not stop and did not understand why. She had been conditioned out of genuine emotional response. Every sincere feeling she had was beaten back or mocked until she stopped showing it. One honest sentence undid years of that in a single second. The disturbing part is not the crying. It is what the crying means. She had never been told that before. Not once. No one in her entire life had looked at her without flinching, and she did not have the equipment to process being seen without cruelty. That is quiet damage, the kind that does not bleed visibly, the kind that is completely real. Kaido has been trying to die for decades. He has been executed 7 times. He has jumped from the tops of mountains. He has fought the strongest people alive and asked them to kill him. Nothing worked. remorse. Nothing even comes close. He does not want to be alive. The series does not say this plainly, but the behavior points to it clearly. He drinks constantly. He seeks stronger and stronger opponents. He decided that if nothing could kill him, then the only death worthy of him would be in the greatest war the world has ever seen. So he built toward it. He created an army. He collected devil fruits. He manufactured smile fruits, which were a grotesque attempt to create soldiers who could only smile, who literally had the ability to express grief removed from them, because he wanted warriors who would never show fear. He turned an entire country into a weapon pointed at his own death. Everything that happened in Wano, the starvation, the suffering of an entire nation across decades, all of it traces back to one man who could not die and decided to make the world burn until something finally could kill him. He turned his own suffering into a weapon pointed at everyone around him. That is the most disturbing thing about Kaido. Not his strength, not his cruelty. The reason behind all of it.